Oh no, we're
I
that.
know.
No.
that like voice that introduces you to it is so creepy.
Oh, it means hearing us right now. Hi.
Yeah.
Oh God. I was hoping all day it wouldn't be me. Oh well. How you doing so far?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm assuming it's already paired, so we're 2-1. I think. Yeah.
I am actually 1-2, I believe.
Oh.
Either way, we're chilling.
Yeah. Just chilling. No stress at this point. Oh God, I hope I can't pick up the fan. I'm gonna move the fan just in case somebody is watching this live stream. Doesn't sound like I'm standing next to a twister. Oh yeah. But actually, like right before this class, I had an in-class assignment for actual class, for like a real lecture. So I'm like really quick before this class doing a quick little short answer essay. So fun stuff. Because I was like, technically, normally it'd be like, oh, I was at a debate tournament. Sorry, couldn't do it. But now it's like, that was online. Were you really there all day? You're telling me you couldn't?
Oh no, I don't go to class today. Are you kidding me, dude? No thanks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make speech drop. But also, like, all of my RFBs for whatever reason have taken a really, really long amount of time. So like I've been getting out of rounds
late, yeah.
right when the next round starts. So yeah, I truly couldn't go to a
my RFD's been okay.
Round 4?
Yeah, my class was 2 to 3, so there was no way I'm going to that. I just hope he doesn't get mad. So you did the in-class assignment, but you weren't in class. Don't
worry about it.
Hope he's not checking.
Don't worry about it.
I guess I could have popped in there, been like, "Hey, I'm at a tournament. I can leave the mic on if you want to hear me debate for 40 minutes." Yeah, I guess I'll just send him this link. Here you go. Actually, yeah, I guess I might just send him this link. This is where I was.
Are you good with speed?
I'm okay.
Just kind of in general. I mean, I'm not like crazy fast.
I'm okay, but I've come to realize people's definitions of speed is very subjective. Like some people are like, "Oh, I'm fast," and I'm like, "They feel like I'm fast." I'm like, "Oh yeah, you are. Yeah, slow, please." So I'm okay with it.
Okay, just please feel free to yell clear, slow, whatever during when I see if I go too fast, and I'll adjust the rest around accordingly.
Gotcha. Did you put a speech drop in the thing?
Yeah, I can. I'll wait for the
judge.
Yeah, because I don't really know where they are.
Yeah, I always put the street shop there. I just don't drop the. Hey, Farias. I don't know if you can judge me. You technically were my coach.
Yeah, I did not check the postings. I'm going to go take care of that, Tony. I just saw the ballot and I was like, I got to go.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Hi, live stream, by the way. Goodbye, live stream.
Darn, shouldn't have said anything. Wouldn't have mattered. I don't think he would be biased either way. He might actually.
Fair. There's a better.
Thank you. Yeah, I just don't put the document until like everyone's ready to go.
No, I get you. Makes sense.
Yeah. So are you saying Sac State because we're at Sac State or because I'm Sac State? Just curious.
Because we're at Sac State.
Yeah. Like sometimes I'll name it after the debate or sometimes a tournament. So I'm kind of like,
I always name it by the tournament.
Helps the organization.
Indeed. Man.
I'm just going to do this.
Oh man, it has already been a long day. And it's
Dude, we still have another round.
still another round. Got some more tomorrow. Not a fan, but I am a fan.
Maybe I should just say, "Hey, Steve, it's good."
It's all good, man. It happens. Tons of Necron stories.
Yeah. He's a professor for Pacific, but he was like the second professor also for Delta for a while before I graduated, the CC. So yeah, that's technically a conflict of interest.
But
Yeah. Oh well. How long you been debating?
so this is my first year of policy debate. I
Mhm.
was a novice in policy debate, but I've been debating since freshman or sophomore year of high school. I did public forum for 2 years and then did like value LD senior year.
Okay.
How about you?
Shoot. Only did it in college, but this will be my. Let me think. I started police topics, so police, cyber, global. This is my 4th year. Dang, feel old. I got 1 more year. Because I didn't do any national last year, so I have 1 more year, I guess.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, it's all been LD and Parley, which are pretty different. Both are kind of policy based, although in Parley you sometimes get the value and the fact.
I did Parley at our state tournament, essentially.
That's always fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Did you ever get a metaphor?
I don't even know what that is, man.
Oh, like the resolution will, instead of being some policy or some action, will be like, we're not in Kansas anymore.
No, that was none of those. They were all values of fact or policy. So.
Okay. Yeah. Because like in a metaphor, I'd be very lenient on the neg. I'd be like, yeah, they had no clue what they were going to do.
Yeah, our Parley resolutions were, I don't know, they're all just kind of
Yeah.
It was still a lot of fun though. I just really enjoy that style of debate. We always just do it one time a year at our state championship tournament, just kind of for fun. But we did pretty well in it. So
yeah, Parley's fun, exciting. That you always get new res. Sometimes I get the res, and I'm like, I guess I don't do it anymore because Sac's only LD.
right.
Oops, never mind.
Hey, sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm getting swapped in.
Awesome. Appreciate it. All right. I'm gonna drop my 1AC into the speed shop.
Okay.
Just make sure it's the right one. Yeah.
There's
Okay. Cool.
Substantial delay on what I'm saying. I don't know. I said that like a minute ago, so I don't know what that's about. Can you hear me as I'm speaking right now?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. My philosophy is up on tab room, or if you have any questions.
Yeah. I just glanced at it. I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good too.
And then we already talked before around that. We're both comfortable with speed, but I told them to yell out clear or slow if I start going too fast. So
Yeah, just make sure the tag lines are clear, and that's about it.
yeah, no, that for sure. I always really hit the brakes on that. So
Cool. Then I got
awesome. Alrighty.
Here's what we flow, anyways.
Is everyone ready? Yeah. Cool. Okay. With that said, let's begin on Inherency 1. 9 organizations, 7 of which are faith-based, currently handle the logistics of refugee resettlement, from Felder and McBride in 18. According to the State Department, the logistics of refugee resettlement are largely handled by 9 domestic refugee resettlement agencies, many of them faith-based. Representatives of these organizations meet and review the biographical data of the refugees selected by the State Department's refugee support centers abroad to determine where they should be resettled. Next, religious institutions holding full control of refugee resettlement opens the door for religious discrimination and the othering of religious refugees, from Borgia in 17. They've not been effective or consistent in their efforts to resettle refugees with their own state of commitment to accommodate religious differences in the system. There's a big gap between the voluntary agency employees and local church volunteers who viewed refugee care as a religious ministry that don't have anything to do with government. Church volunteers may unfortunately missteps to accommodate refugees' religious differences because they lack reliable information about the groups that they are aiding. Church volunteers consider refugee care to be an opportunity to evangelize. Next on Asology. A rethinking of involving religion in refugee resettlement is essential in upholding refugees' human rights, from Nixon in 18. The 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees did not contain a provision for atheism or non-religion. UN's Human Rights Committee declared that the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights protects theistic, not theistic, and atheists, completes as well as the rights not profess any religion. There are issues with this process as applied to the atheist, non-religious refugees, and these issues open up critiques of the religion category. There needs to be adjustments to the policy processes that are useful in non-religious asylum cases. Next, Sections 207 and Section 301 of the Refugee Act of 1980 establishes the overall limits and coordination of refugee resettlement. This is directly from those sections themselves, starting with Section 207. The number of refugees who may be admitted may not exceed 50,000 unless the president determines that admission of a specific number of refugees in excess of such number is justified, set from Section 301. The coordinator shall be responsible for the president for the development of overall United States refugee admission and resettlement policy, the coordination of the United States domestic and international refugee remission and resettlement programs. Thus, the plan text. The United States federal government should remove Sections 207 and Section 301 of the Refugee Act to 1. Decommission the acting 9 voluntary agencies for refugee resettlement. 2nd, abolish the cap on refugee admissions. And 3rd, establish a new agency to take over refugee resettlement. We reserve the right to clarify, ask, and I'll answer. On to our first advantage, which is going to be white supremacy. First, state-led refugee resettlement programs allow for white evangelicals to pursue white supremacist ambitions. This is from Borgen and Gibson in 19. We evangelicals welcome Southeast Asian refugees. They disown evangelical terms. Evangelicals were eager to resettle Christians. These missionary efforts were the particular administrative relations of the American resettlement system. The government placed dependent refugees in Christian institutions. Refugee resettlement allowed them to serve and grow their own people. White evangelicals pursue humanitarian work, the religious mission that places heavy emphasis on the significance of race and nation in the construction of peoplehood. Second, volunteer agencies or VOLAGs for refugee resettlement has stoked an evangelical infight that has fostered the codification of white supremacy. Eliminate the role of these VOLAGs now to hinder the expansion of white supremacy from Grayson, Hines, and 20. The organization is a subcontract with the U.S. government to implement refugee resettlement disproportionate to Christian for majority white denominations. Recent state level anti-refugee legislation has left local branches of the VOLAGs to defend resettlement. The legislation aims to limit refugee resettlement and supports user body to emphasize legitimate national belonging as with other forms of nationalism. Women, their bodies, and reproductive mark the boundaries of the nation. Pro-refugee activists attempted to bolster refugee resettlement by highlighting white Christian refugee groups, reinforcing the idea that white Christian refugees were preferred to promote the ideas that refugees could be good. Next, a racialization of immigration entrenches white supremacy and racial nativism produced by the above infight, but plan solved from Grayson, Hines, and 20. Racist nativism highlights how the racialization of immigration status has served to support white supremacy by legitimizing and instruction of use citizenship and belonging is inherently white, creates ever-shifting hierarchies of race. The process is reinforced by historical racialization of immigration law that legitimizes and obscures the exclusion of non-white immigrants. The ignorance of refugees relies upon broad arguments of culture to obscure discussions of race and religion to a category of refugee to symbolize a broad racialized other. And next, white supremacy is responsible for massive global violence and oppression, and its continued acceptance risks human extinction from Commission on 13. An ideological war on white supremacy would do humanity immense favors, especially the people of color who are terrorized by everyday lives. White supremacy has been responsible for well over 100 million deaths. White supremacy not only kills bodies, it destroys mind. White supremacy is most effective in its ideological form. Everything else is a destructive manifestation of that ideology. Mass incarceration, the prison industry complex, police brutality are all lethal aspects of white supremacy. Wars are ultimately justified by white supremacy. The struggle and white supremacy must continue regardless. Resistance is paramount. White supremacy is given birth to apartheid, Jim Crow, mass murder, slavery. The list literally goes on and on. White supremacy is killing massive people, physically and mentally. Humanity depends on the collective commitment to end the law before it's metastasized and puts an end to us all. Next, our second advantage, which is going to be First Amendment rights. The Refugee Act of 1980 enables a denial of refugees' First Amendment rights, specifically the freedoms of speech and religious expression. This oppression is going to play out in two scenarios. Scenario one being that non-religious asylees do not have the right to being non-religious respected upon arrival to the U.S. from Nixon in 18. Particular attention to be paid to the case of atheism and non-religion because that type of religion has a culture that can be problematic for those who do not adhere to religious beliefs. Formulating religious collectives as a protected category can be problematic when considered from the perspective of non-religious groups efforts to advocate for religious politics, privileges, forms of religion favored by those who write laws and marginalize other modes of belief and belonging. These categories exude or silence dissident or less mainstream voices. Next, scenario two. Religious refugees find themselves in an evangelical mission to be proselytized or are harmfully placed into inaccurate categories. First, U.S. refugee resettlement manuals encourage church volunteers to subject refugees to coercive religious involvement from Borden 17. Resettlement manuals encourage church sponsors to refugees to start Sunday services, voluntary agencies, and church sponsors therefore do not consider bringing refugees to church being an inappropriate religious activity. However, any refugee did seem being brought to worship services as a religious act and sometimes a coercive one. Next, refugee resettlement preparation woefully underprepares those responsible for resettlement and in turn forces refugees into inaccurate labels from Borden 17. Some aspects of religious life are not immediately legible as religion. Somali refugees who are Muslims have a religion that church sponsors immediately recognize as legitimate violence. Not their consequences of forcing refugees to engage with the category that refugees might not use to describe themselves. Third, denying basic human rights by legislative choice walks back on the U.S. Constitution. This retreat from the Constitution poses an existential threat to the legitimacy of U.S. democracy from Bellarmine 14. Legal constitutions regard the political system as being established through and constrained by judicial protect the legal constitution operates a higher law democratic mechanism through which people authorize their political and legal representatives to account that comprise the constitution of a polity. No objective epistemology can ground the ontological determinations by court regarding even basic human rights. The legitimacy of such arguments must press on their concurs with the democratically established views of those to whom they are to apply, be it through their constitution. And last, democracy is key to stopping multiple existential threats and to prevent war. Backsliding causes those systems to unravel. From Kendall Taylor in 16. Democratic decline will weaken U.S. partnerships and erode foundation for U.S. cooperation. Domestic politics are key to determine international behavior. Democracies are more likely to form alliances and cooperate. Democratic decline could compromise partnerships required to confront complex challenges, climate change, migration, violent extremism, demand cooperation that democratic backsliding would put in peril. And with that said, I stand open for 3 minutes across.
Okay, sorry, I had 2 tabs open. Trying my timer now. So let's see. Just I'm assuming based off this, after your plan, we'll see a nice uptick in the asylees coming here. Is that how that's going to function? What exactly happens directly after your plan?
I mean, it's pretty impossible to be like, yes, this is exactly what's going to happen, since it's, of course, like a hypothetical plan. But I mean, yeah, certainly you can get that with abolishing the cap on refugee admissions. Certainly, yeah,
we'll see an uptick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so So what exactly is your plan doing then in a vacuum? Like you're
So we outline it in three, but like all three of the planks. Yeah. So first is to decommission the current acting 9 voluntary agencies who are working on refugee
all
resettlement.
at once or sequential?
All at once, I guess.
Sure.
Second, abolish the cap on refugee admissions as outlined in Section 207. And third, establish a new agency to take over refugee resettlement. The bind is that we really can't be like, yes, this is exactly what this new agency is going to look like, because otherwise I'm extra T, and yeah, I don't want to do that.
Okay. Let's see. So how exactly does doing this solve for like white supremacy as this root causing? He's like, I see it's an instance of solving for, but how are you actually solving for like this?
Yeah, no, I get it. So this is a really common question. So it's all pretty much contingent on those two Grace and Hines 20 cards. The first one says that like this evangelical infight has fostered the codification of white supremacy. And it's like this codification of white supremacy is exponentially dangerous towards white supremacy gaining those like that platform for massive global violence and oppression. That next card from Grace 920 says that this racialization of immigration is only going to just further entrench this, giving white supremacists that platform. So the idea is through negating this racialization of immigration and through taking these refugees out of the hands of these voluntary agencies who have fostered the codification of white supremacy, we can fight supremacy at the root, white supremacy at the root.
Okay, so you're just fighting this instance of it being a through. Well, you're saying this codifies it, but like, how does that solve for like what's already in existence? Is what I'm trying to say. This doesn't reverse truth.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean, but it's just like the stance of the 1AC is essentially that like any instance of fighting white supremacy is going to be a beneficial act for the millions of people affected by white supremacy.
Okay, and can you explain the thesis of like, your structure on the bottom was interesting to me. The First Amendment scenarios, are those tying into like the first advantage, or how is that functioning?
No, I mean, they're all contingent on religious expression. So the first scenario is that right now, non-religious asylees are like facing really particular and unique discrimination. And then the second scenario is that if even the refugees who are religious, those religious refugees are just trying to have been proselytized and are harmfully placed into these inaccurate categories that don't actually accurately reflect their religion.
Okay. Just going up and down the dock real quick. Oh, never mind. I'll start 4 minutes rank prep. I need to get like a dollar store timer so it stops falling asleep on me. Starting that now. Well, it's not going to sync, so it's fine. We'll see if I excuse me. Okay. I got. I'll run it down to 2. I'll stop at 2 minutes remaining. And I'll upload a doc. I guess I'll give the roadmap while I'm doing this. It's going to be 4 off. Barring time, possibly 3, but I think I should be able to get through all 4 with a decent amount of time for some on case. Of course, there's something named 1NC.
So I had the exact same problem last round. I kept naming all of my docs the exact same name and just uploaded the wrong doc like 4 times.
I just call it 11, so hopefully there's no. Let's see. Cool, there it is. And I go.
Sweet, I'm downloading it. I'll let you know I'm already.
Sounds good. Should I just let me know when you're ready because I don't have the visual open, just the.
I am ready when everyone else is.
Sounds good to me.
What's the order?
It's going to be 4-3, barring time constraints off. So I'm hoping for 4, but if I'm running out of time at the bottom, we'll go 3.
Cool.
And then, sorry, I actually didn't say it, but
Repeat.
They were saying they're good. I think everyone's good. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, start timer. Now, so the first T is going to be removed. Interprets 1AC may only eliminate statutory restrictions. Implementing immigration reform is not an answer because the presence of the presence removes in the resolution. Meaning the word remove transfers our property onto an object. Statutory restrictions, which means that a type of immigration reform, particularly in the resolution, is one that only removes restrictions on legal immigration as they exist in statutory law. Removes Merriam-Webster 2020. Remove transitive verbs to get rid of a limited. Transitive verb is Traffus 2020. A transitive verb is only one that makes sense if it exerts its action on the object. And instead of transitive verb means to affect something else. The problem that we are going to see here is if you go to their plan text, and I clarified it in cross-X, as they say I should ask. And they have 2 actions which you consider removal: the decommissioning and the abolishing the cap. But then they have establishing a new agency to take over refugee resettlement. This in itself, to me, is where you're going to get the violation that they do not actually remove. The 1AC does not remove a statutory restriction. The penalty rights are easy to restriction. In this case, they're writing it and replacing it with something else. So that means they're not removing, they're now adding. And it's also extra topical as they have to create this new restriction. They said they don't want to give a name to it or say what it's going to do. But I'm like, you're still extra topical in the world where you create it. Standard limits are interpreters are the best for limits. We provide a fair limit that guarantees the predicted negative ground. Our interpreters don't only limit the mechanism for the app. They interpret the 1AC to close the topic and makes it bidirectional. It destroys predictability. Resolutional integrity. Our interpreters best for resolutional integrity because there's a grammatically correct interpretation of all the words in the resolution. Our interpreters don't allow for anything specified in the word in the topic to be considered topical. Implement immigration reform is not an answer, which the resolution tells us what the reform should look like. Bright line. Our interpreter is clear for what is a clear line delineation. The 1AC's interpreter destroys any clear demarcation of what is in topical. Our interpreter is key for prediction stable negative ground. D voters rules of NFLD. You're required by the rules of NFLD to vote negative when they're not topical. If you were to vote on this page, destroys fairness education, prefer committee interpretation, preferring interpretation reasonability. And this is because there's no clear way to try to determine what the reasonable interpret is. Legal immigration. Legal immigration is legal permanent residency in the U.S. Legal match 2018. Legal immigration refers to permanent residency status and is considered a main step towards permanent U.S. citizenship. The app must and may only. The app must and may only remove statutory restrictions on legal immigration, which is distinct from non-immigrant status. American Immigration Center 2010. There are 2 types of U.S. visas available: immigrant and non-immigrant visas. Immigrant visas are designed for people who wish to make the U.S. a permanent residency. Non-immigrant visas are designed to allow visitors in the U.S. temporary for specific purposes. The 1AC is not topical. They don't remove statutory restrictions on legal and permanent residency. The 1AC is well, first of all, in the fact that they're doing it refugees and asylees, those would not be permanent residency. They're not coming here to live here. And the 1AC is topical. The 1AC removes restriction beyond the process of obtaining legal permanent residency, and the fact that they're adding, so you can say just cross-apply with the whole extra argument above. And topical by effects, maybe these people become residents down the road, but that in itself is not removing it for the permanent residency. Cross-apply predictability, but we'll say limits. Limits are interpreters. Our interpreters best for predictability. The resolution is the only stable gauge of preparation for negative team. This shows predictive DA again, kind of plan ground, exposed any reaches burn. Limits are interpreters. That's fair limit. The is a key to limit F ground is pocket uniquely, even if they win, that they have a reasonable interpretation. They expose F ground, destroys fairness of the resolution, open the debate to all entry and CU, already limited A ground further. Precision is not the answer when it doesn't provide a reason for limiting. The topic resolution 10 interprets best for the intent of the resolution. The topic in the committee has specific discussion on this issue. The topic of discussion, the rest of the argument specifically when writing this topic and rejected your interpret. Voters, the rules of NFLD, and your required rules, and if you vote negative when they're not topical, if you vote on this page, translation, referring to interpretation, referring to interpretation and reasonability in this instance because there's no clear way to provide to determine what the reasonable interpret is. This can be a secondary. It's also a priority, but I say it's second to the first sheet. DA infrastructure ticks. Biden's infrastructure agenda is passing now, but bipartisan desire for infrastructure reform is key to gaining 10 Republican senators. But environmental projects aimed at climate change are a sticking point. Weaver 2021. Biden administration and its Democratic allies' next big legislative policy, multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure package, sweeping infrastructure will garner support. Congress could struggle to craft legislation that appeals to Republicans, which all fill in Biden's ambition to clean and racial inequity. Biden wants to move quickly as possible. Mentioned he said he would not support infrastructure bill that does not have Republican backing. He would be willing to back a package up to $4 trillion as long as it could secure the support of as many 10 Republican senators along with the entire Democratic caucus. While some projects could win Republican backing, Biden's desires that also use the bill to help meet the administration goal of eliminating carbon emissions from the electric sector by 2035 will prove a tougher sell. Depending on infrastructure and ensuring a widespread public support. Immigration bills require compromise with Democrats to pass 50-50 Senate. The 1AC supercharges intra-parity splits between progressive and moderate Democrats, putting Biden support subsequent legislative goals at risk new in 2021. The fate of immigration reform ultimately lies in the Democratic Party. If its pivotal members choose Republican votes or with the rest of the Biden's legislative goals have any chance of succeeding, the right remains committed to punitive policies at its border and aggressive and enforce major items of dockets for Democrats want to reach a filibuster, approve 60 electoral in the Senate without a significant amount of Republican support. Passing legislation this year will be no easy task given the extreme wing of the Republican Party and moderate Democrats who want to appeal to Republican supporters. But opposition has not come from Democrats, but Manchin, Kelly, and Sinema. Even if Democrats decide to go their own, the shape and scope of any final legislation will be determined by the party's moderates. Compromise on immigration means that the moderate interests prevail on infrastructure reform. Progressive agenda items like environmental investments get cut. Infrastructure bill to achieve bipartisan support. Cochrane Burn 2021. Lawmakers in both parties emphasize infrastructure as a source of cooperation. Early bipartisan build over. Republicans criticizing the size and some of Mr. Biden's proposal, the transportation bill, I think, needs to be a transportation, not a Green New Deal. Pelosi said Democrats would pursue a bipartisan legislative action, but it will have to make a judgment about addressing climate change and economic inequality that the Republicans might not support. Pressed by a Republican for a compromise bipartisan such will hinge on scope of the package put forward by Democrats. Most notable beyond the administration's decision to include climate change as a key tenet. Without decarbonization, dirty U.S. emissions create more massive impacts worldwide, including disease, famine, habitat destruction, and air pollution. Jacobs in 2015, the cost of climate change impacts the world due to U.S. GHG emissions, including coastal flood, drought states, energy sector, health costs due to heat stress and heat stroke influenza, malaria, famine, ocean acidification, and increased drought and wildfire, severe weather, increased air and pollution. The sum of all these emissions causing net damage to the U.S. as a whole, $265 billion per year, and to the world of $3.3 trillion per year. Extinction from climate change will be prioritized first as a threat multiplier, makes all other impacts more probable, again, to push societies to collapse towards 2016. Climate change to take priority over every other threat. They have the capacity to rise to lower probability of other scenarios, and terrorists like more likely. The collapse of globalism, agriculture failures, economic uncertainty, and political instability. Climate change were causes of rising spill in Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Ukraine. Poverty, social trends, and effectual leadership and weak political institution push society to the brink of collapse. Collapse of global ecosystem, elevate the likelihood of nuclear wars, nuclear terrorism, engineer pandemics, and superintelligence takeover, and it ought to take precedence over all of the risk concerns. Just cut out the AMRs and go straight to your own case. So in the solvency here, like I don't ever like see a reason actually how like he tries to explain that like they're solving for the core of white supremacy, but I'm just gonna say like the uniqueness overwhelms the link here in a world where like first I would say like if you look at my TIX in a world where this is like seen as like a rallying point or a turning point for like the Republican base and like the Republican Democrats to alienate them, I would see if anything like they have a potential for this action like where it's literally pushing the people who would be the white conservative base or like potentially out of the area of having an effect. So it's like seems retarded to me. So that in of itself I see would make a bigger backlash. And actually, so I just feel like first uniqueness overwhelms the link. There's no way this will solve like the root cause of white supremacy, and if anything it'll make it worse. Like we'll see a very reactionary backlash to this policy. And advantage to the First Amendment rights. Oh well, let's have a good debate.
All right.
I'm open for prospects. I'll start when you start.
Yeah. Let's begin on both T arguments. All right. So on both effects and extra topical. Yeah.
Yeah. Effects for the refugees not being permanent residency, and if you try to say they'll become permanent residency, we're only that'll happen down the road. And then the extra is for the agency you're creating. Well, first of all, the agency is just on top, of course. It's not a removal, but it's also extra because you're creating something outside the mandate of the resolution. So yeah, take from which will. It's definitional and extra on that one.
Okay. That's fine. Let's go to the TIX TA. What's the uniqueness of this evidence that's saying this will absolutely pass right now when like there's already like Democratic Party infighting? One of your cards later on says that like Sinema, Manchin, centrist Democrats aren't going to support this bill. Like, what's the uniqueness that this particular progressive immigration reform is going to overwhelm the entire DA?
The whole thing's like a brink story. We're saying right now there's a potential for it, and like that yours is going to push us over the brink and lose us the support we need. So it's unstable now. We have a chance of passing, and we absolutely get rid of that chance.
And then this infrastructure deal is the like end all be all for saving climate change.
I'd say every action is necessary. If you look to like my last impact card there. I see like every action we can take to stop something that could potentially affect like all across the board and make all of their impacts worse is necessary. So sure, I'd say every instance is a good that we.
I mean, so yeah, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if the infrastructure is entirely like that's what you need to solve climate change.
Yeah, it's necessary to solve climate change. Yeah,
it's entirely probable that like
it's not going to be
if infrastructure doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the analytic turn for solvency. Yeah, like I don't know. I just think this turn was kind of confusingly articulated. Like, what are you trying to say here? That like this plan is going to target white evangelicals, therefore more violence, or?
I'm trying to say that this plan in of itself is like a backlash, and that it would it's actually more likely to cause like the white evangelical base to cause these advantages you're trying to say you're solved for. Like I'm seeing a world where like So yeah, it's pretty much kind of what you said. It's like that this can be seen as a rallying point, your thing. It's based off the same logic of like just a general political backlash.
Sure. And then how will this backlash manifest itself? Like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about instances of violence? Are we talking about like the violence I outlined in case?
This is why I was asking in cross-ex, like, because you said it was already codified and they've already like had this structure in place. You getting rid of them ability to like redirect the refugees doesn't necessarily get rid of the structure that's already in place. And with that, they can then cause the impacts that you say you're trying to prevent.
Okay.
Because if they already have it codified in structure. Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, you're fine. Let's go to this top T shell, which funny enough is Truman States. So I find it that's just funny. Anyway, nothing. There's no like argument there. I was like, hey, I know this one. Let's go to the bright line standard, and particularly if we provide an interpretation that like establishes a bright line and is from a reliable source, will that be enough for you? That demarcates that what is or isn't topical.
As far as like this one goes for removal. Because I would say, well, I'll answer your question. I would say like no in this instance because like if you look to the third plank of your plan, you're not actually doing a removal. So I don't know how you're going to bright line that on the other side of removing and you're adding. But sure, you could try to do that.
Cool. Okay. With that said, let me get my papers in order, and let's start my prep now. I'm not sure how much I'm going to use, but let's keep it rolling. Starting 3, 2, 1. All right. I stopped there with 3:30 used, so I'll have 30 seconds left. I'm going to open the back. Sorry, it's not loading.
Did you close the doc? That might be.
Yeah, no, I did. And oh, okay. I saved it to the wrong location. I apologize. All right. Should be loading in. No. Apologize about that. Order is going to be order last speech. So, well, okay. I mean, I guess if you want to flow like extra T on a separate page, I do have like a whole shell on that, but I might honestly not even go over the whole shell. I'll try and be clear where we are and stuff. So that would be T removes, T legal immigration, the P60A, and then the case term. All righty. Is everyone ready?
Yep. Whenever you're good.
Good to go.
Cool. Oh, my dock crashed. I love my Mac today. Where is it? Please load. I'm so sorry, folks.
It's all good.
Okay, sweet. There we go. Really apologize about that, so I'll make sure to start real quick. We're going to start on T removes. First, our common interpretation is that remove means to eliminate. This is from New Oxford American Dictionary in 20. Eliminate or get rid of. We are getting rid of Section 301 of the Refugee Act of 1980, creating multiple sections, containing multiple sections of different sorts of legislation. Next, on to standards. Ground. Our definition provides better ground from both sides, bettering the education of the round. We provided the ample ground to run any sort of like a DA or like off-case positions as we've seen today. Next, real world. This definition is applicable to actual policy-making procedures as executive orders have become a heavily utilized mechanism to direct policy initiatives. On to voters, NFALD rules, fairness and education, reasonability. If T is 100% a loss, then you must be 100% certain that I'm non-topical before voting on T. Reasonably, we can agree that my AF removes statutory restrictions, which is all the resolution asks me to do. Next, in regards to us removing a certain amount of statutory restrictions, this is kind of a response to the extra T argument, is that the counter interpretation is that enforcement falls under the purview of statutory restrictions. The text of the Refugee Act of 1980 explicitly recognizes this. So this is from the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980. This is at the very top, section 101A through B. The objectives of the sector are to provide a permanent and systematic procedure for the admission of refugees to provide comprehensive and uniform provisions for the effective resettlement of refugees. So therefore, we're removing statutory restrictions that fall under a topical guise. Reasons to prefer this interpretation is that it is a legal source. This definition comes from the top executive agency that handles, this definition comes from the actual legislation itself. Preferring this definition offers us the definition that all of the policies for refugee resettlement are based on. Real world, once again, all real policy is based on this language provided by the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980. To make today's on the most realistic possible, my definition should be preferred. Next on the standards, you can actually just cross-apply the top standards. So that'd be NFALD rules, fairness and education, reasonability. Ignore that. No, I apologize. Yeah. Standards. Ground. Our definition provides better ground for bettering both sides of the education of the round. We provided the ample ground to run the amount of arguments he did. And then same thing, real world. Just cross-apply those standards, cross-apply the voters. That's what I meant to do. Sorry about that slip up. All righty. On to immigration. Counter-interpretation, claiming asylum in the U.S. grants the same legal protections that legal immigrants are granted. This is from DHS 20, the exact top executive agency on immigration. An asylee is a person who meets the definition of refugee and is already present in the United States or is seeking admission at a port of entry. Refugees are required to apply for lawful permanent resident green card status 1 year after being admitted, and asylees may apply for green card status 1 year after they are granted asylum. In CX, my opponent kind of like slipped in that like a little thing like, oh, they don't come here permanently. They are quite literally required to stay here permanently once they're in our refugee system. Once again, reason for this definition, same as above. This one is from DHS, the top executive agency that sets all like that is the top dog when it comes to immigration and immigration enforcement, right? The only new standard here is going to same standards and then same voters again, okay? And then answer to the extra T. Just reject the violation. Policymakers don't know the resolution, and it is important to use plans that directly relate but are not confined to the exact wording of the topic. My plan is reasonably topical and increases education. Extra T is not a rules violation. You need proven abuse, but all of my advantages are from topical parts of the plan, so there is none. On their standards, Clash is going to check abuse, and we certainly have a lot of Clash in today's round. Next, topical literature checks abuse. There's enough evidence on both sides that the neg is not skewed out of the round, and there is absolutely no bright line on abuse. Same voters. So I do apologize that all those T shells were really mixed up, but these T arguments, there's like 5 different interpretations here, but you see that we meet their removes, we meet the removes, we meet statutory restrictions, we meet that refugees are going to fall under that guise of legal immigration, and we are not extra T. That covers all of our bases on T for all the reasons above, all the standards and voters above. Once again, sorry it was messy, but we'll get there. All right, next on to the politics DA. First, Biden's infrastructure won't pass. McConnell vows to oppose it, but Biden wants to win GOP support before passing it. That part's really important, that Biden wants to win GOP support. Most importantly, pay attention to the date of this. Kromick and Bruniger from yesterday, April 1st of 21. That postdates their evidence, the Weaver 21 card that says this isn't going, that says that it is passing now. This evidence says it is not going to pass. That is because any hopes that Washington could scrape together a bipartisan infrastructure package took a hit. McConnell told reporters that the plan the White House unveiled is not going to get support from our side. I'm going to fight them every step of the way because I think this is the wrong prescription for American McConnell settlements. 10 Republicans break with McConnell or Biden relies plan to win GOP votes. Biden has said he wants to win GOP support for the plan. But most importantly, we talk about a lot of bipartisanship within this DA. Bipartisanship isn't the answer. Partisan coalitions are. That is because partisanship helps pass bills from Renda and 20. Researchers find polarization does not cause political deadlock and in fact may increase the number of bills passed. Coalition lawmakers, not political parties, are more responsible for advancing legislation. Coalitions are often partisan. The reality is that coalitions are more dynamic than political parties. Coalitions, legislators, transcend political party partisanship actually helps rather than hinders bills. The House would be even more effective at passing bills if it weren't for the high levels of partisanship passage in the House. And next, and really important because of the impact in this politics DA. Bipartisanship is not only unattainable, but also prevents Democrats from tackling climate change from Renda in 18. The Democratic side of the dynamic defensively sought to accommodate their conservative criticism, hoping to win bipartisan support by doing so only be attacked more savagely. Their efforts have also become increasingly divorced from reality. Democrats will never get the Republican support they yearn for, and will solve large problems such as climate change and the Green New Deal. So what we're saying here is that bipartisanship isn't the answer, and there's absolutely no chance for the impact of this DA to be triggered because 1, the plan's not going to pass, and 2, it's not the answer to actually tackling climate change as the DA attempts to assert. On to case. So the only real argument here is this turn that we're going to cause more right-wing backlash. This simply isn't true because the pinnacle of right-wing backlash, like January 6th, the riot, happened under Trump, right? So this card from Verdict 19. QAnon was born during Trump's presidency, a time of harsh immigration cutbacks. The turn's effort to pin progressive reforms as the cause of extreme right backlash undermines the FBI efforts to monitor this right-wing violence since 2019. It shows that the turn, not the DA, is unique from Verdict in 2019. An FBI document identifies conspiracy theories as potential domestic terrorism threats, specifically identifying QAnon. The FBI assesses these conspiracy theories will very likely emerge, spread, and evolve in the modern information marketplace, occasionally driving both groups and individuals to carry out criminal or violent acts of violence or attempts thereof have already been tied to the buzz of conspiracy theories. You can cut that there, theories. So what we're saying here is that progressive immigration isn't the reason for this backlash from these like white evangelicals and things like that, because it happened during a time where where a ton of white evangelicals supported the president. All right, the only card I didn't read there would have been that last one, the Ferguson 17 card.
Cool. I'll take 2 minutes of running prep. Okay, starting that now. isn't going to really be a doc. I'm going to try to clean the T's up as much as possible. This is pretty much just going to be like the one-off for T's. The one I want you to focus on most is probably going to be the extra removes. And I guess if you feel legal immigration. So, okay. So overview, T's, extra removes, that's the legal immigration. Everyone cool?
Yep.
Let's do 6 minutes of a hopefully at least lukewarm rebuttal. Starting now. So first of all, Judge, you should be signing your ballot or circling your ballot, however you want to phrase that for the T's. Or, well, we'll be starting with the extra T in particular. So let's go to the response on extra T. So they said like they reject a violation, that the policymakers don't know the resolution, and I'm sorry, but within this, they're conceding that they're extra topical because they're saying it's important to use plans that directly relate but are not confined to the exact wording of the resolution. My plan is reasonably topical, increase education. I'm sorry, but no, your plan can't be reasonably topical when you just admit that you're like untopical. You just made that it's not confined to the words of the resolution, and that in itself is bad. Like, great, there's great real world policy making out there and activism, but like within this realm, you came to this room, this virtual room at least, knowing the rules of the game. You came in here ready to debate. You knew the resolution, and the fact that you just added something completely new in of itself is extra topical. You added an agency. That isn't removing these statutes. That isn't removing anything. It's just a complete state positive action. So that in itself means you've conceded your extra topical. They try to say that extra topical is not a rules violation. Like extra topicality is still topicality, and a topicality is a rules violation. In fact, topical, extra topical are all still forms of topicality because you do not meet the burden of the resolution. You're doing things outside the resolution, or you're not meeting the resolution. You're still on topical. So you're engaging in all neg arguments. Sure, you engage in like my 1DA. Just because you can engage in this round does not mean you're not abusive. And also like, the abuse comes the fact that you can run your affirmative. Like you wouldn't be able to access these things. You wouldn't be able to have a stable agency for them to function with to get these potential advantages unless you were adding something. So the fact that you can run your aff at all in of itself is abuse. And like child literary checks abuse, like there's enough, I'm sorry, but no, there's enough evidence. When I'm like researching the topic, this one never came up at all because it's like the idea of adding something, first of all, is not. And the asylees refugees, which are not permanent residency status, which is the definition of legal immigration, also did not come up. So yeah, no. So this isn't still is fair. They're still extra topical, and this whole sheet of theirs pretty much concedes the fact you're topical. You should be voting on that, Judge. But if you're not voting on that, you're just voting on the removes, which is similar, pretty much the same line of thought as that first one I just read. They don't meet their own interp. They just read this generic Oxford dictionary of eliminate or get rid of. I'm sorry, but when you add a new agency, you're not eliminating or getting rid of anything. They say they're getting rid of Section 301. So okay, even if you buy that, just default to extra topicality that they've conceded, so they're untopical, and that's abusive because the fact they just get to run their affirmative. They might don't let them say we didn't know Lincoln or anything, because at the end of the day, the fact you can run this affirmative is the abuse on the flow. Grounds are they don't not provide better grounds, and any more grounds we can get from this a new agency or whatever is illusory ground because we couldn't have seen it coming into this round. Real world isn't necessarily good. Don't let them like back up and say, oh, well, this is what real world policymakers do. I'm sorry, but in this room, we are not real world policymakers. Don't let them say being trained to become real world policymakers because you came to this room prepared to debate a certain topic. It's like, yeah, like if you want to say like real world policymakers, it's like someone came in and said, hey, let's do this completely thing that does it just violates the checks and balances within the room of policy. I'm like, oh, but it'll teach us how to be better policymakers for like the UN or something if they want to bring that to discussion within the Senate. And I'm like, it doesn't matter because it's not the game those policymakers came there to play. And in this room, we came here not necessarily to be real policymakers. We came here to debate, and you have violated the rules of that debate, so you should lose. It's not reasonable. Yeah. There's no way the adding of an action can be seen as reasonable when the whole entire resolution is predicated on a negatory. That's been part of the struggle this year, is finding a good negative action that we can take with the state. And you chose to step around this by adding something and giving yourself the ability to just run this affirmative. So no, you're not reasonable. It wasn't reasonable to expect someone to add a new agency to fill a hole you're creating yourself, because that hole you just filled could have potentially been ground. Because if you say, I'm going to gut this program, that program's empty vacuum now that you have created is ground. But now it's gone because you created a stable locus to function with. So yeah, they're definitely not being removed. There's definitely abuse on the flow. Don't let them say no proven abuse, because when they're very affirmative in of itself is the abuse. And don't let them get away with reasonability, because it's just as the year goes on, everyone's going to say I'm reasonably topical, and that just skews us further out of the round. So Judge, the reason you're going to be voting on this like removal abuse is because some people come in and break the rules of debate, and it's unfair that like it just leads to the collapse of debate. Like even if you try to justify real world policymakers, there's other events you can go to if you want to be like more real world policymaker. Like you can go to like a mock Senate or a mock Congress, those kind of things. And I'm sure there's other things that you can do to discuss real world policy policy, but this is debate. We came in here with a set of rules that you practically sign when you start debating, the NFA rules, and they say you have to be topical. You're not topical on 3 different fronts. And that's the only reason you can run this app. Yet again, on to the immigration, they tried to say that their counter-interp doesn't even really meet ours when they say that they are required to apply for LPR. I'm like, that doesn't mean within that first year they can't leave again. It doesn't mean that they're going to get LPR. Like, there's a decades-long backlog for legal permanent residency cards. So, Judge, that in itself means that their effects topical at best on the citizenship, on the legal immigration sheet. So to cross-apply what I said about the real legal source, real world, like, yeah, no, it still doesn't meet my interp. It's a bad counter-interp, if you want to say it like that. Yeah, so NFLD rules, at the end of the day, Judge, it should be a gut check. If you feel that, first, they're extra topical, they're doing something outside the resolution, vote them down. Second, the removal, which is just similar to the extra topical at the end of the day, just more fleshed out, that they're doing something that isn't a removal, vote them down. And if you feel that the asylees and refugees in a vacuum, not counting what they might happen a year from now, which can't guarantee, are not legal permanent residents, then vote them down, because they don't even meet their own interp here. And don't let them get away with this legal source part here, where it's like saying, well, yeah, but that legal source doesn't actually specifically say, oh, they are LPR. It says they have a pathway to it, which is effects. So grounds, yet again, don't let them get away saying we give grounds. It's all illusory. It's fake. We can't predict it coming into the round. And I give the better bright line here than some vague, oh, yeah, they might become legal permanent residents later. I give you a clear bright line of, are they going to become legal permanent residencies within the visa process, within your vacuum, within your plan, versus can they become it later? That's effects topical. Thank you, Judge.
All right, I have 30 seconds left, starting that now. Okay.
Oh, this thing never stops when I press it.
Okay, we're just going to be order the last speech, so I guess that means we're like starting on that weird gray area of extra T and removes, but specifically we're going to respond to extra T first, move to removes, and then move to legal immigration. Oh, and I guess effects is at the end of legal immigration, isn't it? Okay. All right. Cool. Everyone ready? Awesome. Alrighty, Judge, it is a clear ballot for the affirmative today, because we'll just honestly extend that same argumentation, that gut check. If you think that we aren't topical, or if you think that we're topical, at least reasonably topical, you vote now, since we are reasonably topical. But let's specifically go to the line by line of exactly how we are topical. The only real argument against this, like our extra T show, is that we concede that we're extra T. We're saying that like this isn't a real violation, in that we're not working outside of the resolution because we're topical in the first place. Even if I spike out that reject the violation, that first part of that shell, like look at the rest. Extra T is not a rules violation. You need proven abuse, but all my advantages from topical parts are the plan says they're in none. One of the only other arguments here about my case and how it's not topical is because he didn't see it when he did his research that it can't be topical. Of course, this is absurd. We all know immigration is a massive system that affects so many different things. The Refugee Act of 1980, for example, has over 600 sections. This literature base in this resolution is massive, but that doesn't mean that just because it might be from kind of like a corner of the literature base that it isn't topical. We are working inside the resolution, and that is mainly because of our definition we provide in regards to the second like shell down, our counter interpretation from the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980 that specifically says enforcement falls under the purview of statutory restrictions. The text of the Refugee Act of 1980 explicitly recognizes this, so extend that here. This is because that is why we have to include this in our plan. It is a part of the enforcement procedure to engage with the statutory restrictions that the resolution asks us to do. We are absolutely not we're absolutely not extra topical. So let's move to the removes. They say that we are not adding and we're removing. They say that they have no ground because they can't see it coming, which we just addressed. They say that real world is bad because there's not real policymakers in this room, which, yeah, certainly we agree. I'm not a real policymaker by any means, that we're creating a new agency. Most importantly, to answer all of these, extend my cross-examination argument from earlier. We say that we like this. There's a specific reason why I can't specify what the type of agency is in this plan, because then I would be extra T. We don't specify because that would explicitly be an extra T violation, but I can't, so I don't. Therefore, so we're just removing the statutory restriction and engaging with the enforcement of that statutory restriction per the resolution, which is all the resolution asks me to do. And don't buy this collapse of debate argument. One round is not going to collapse the entire collegiate debate activity. Sure, this is being live streamed, but like, I don't know, my girlfriend's probably watching, my mom's watching. Hi, like, that's not going to collapse this entire entire activity. Don't buy this argument. Moving on to the immigration. This is from the DHS. This is from the Department of Homeland Security that says refugees are legal immigrants. They fit under this resolution. They fit under legal immigration, and the Refugee Act of 1980 most certainly addresses that. So then the question becomes, is the Refugee Act of 1980 just non-topical? Absolutely not, which is why you vote affirmative right now. Good round.
All right, yeah, good debate. Give me a minute here, and I'll make a decision, and I'll be back.
I guess the bot stays for the RFD. Oh, good.
I know you're done. Joe Packer also hates condoms. Okay.
Good. I'm feeling.
Yeah. Joe's good.
My coach was all like, "Oh yeah, all 2 people watching it, so I don't stress out." It's more than 2 people.
How many we got?
I don't know. I left, but I saw 1 and 2. Oof. Yeah.
It's fine. So what?
Yeah, I didn't want to after.
More education about refugee resettlement policy. Who doesn't want that? I know everyone loves to talk about it.
I didn't want to ask some cross-ex, but how exactly does that function? So, like, these people decide that kind of like where they settle when they get here.
Yeah, no, it's kind of weird, right? So what happens is, I don't want to say any of this and like affect the judge's decision.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
But okay. Regardless, what happens is like, the UN identifies refugees as like potentially vulnerable. It's like the UN Human Resettlement Commission, essentially. And then they recommend that those refugees apply to the U.S. for refugee resettlement. Once they're accepted for refugee resettlement, then the U.S. government essentially just hands over these bodies to these non-military agencies. And then it's like, yep.
And some of them are somewhat biased, at least to say the least, in their opinions of how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Oh well, at least for once I can actually watch my own round afterwards and see how I did.
True.
Actually, let me send this link to my professor. So, hey, I was doing something. I didn't just skip your class for fun this time. that? Oh, what's that? Oh, it is. Okay.
All right. Are folks here?
I am.
I'm here.
Okay, this was a good debate. I end up voting negative. I think there are a few T problems you got here. Like, the biggest one is that I think that given the arguments in the debate, the F is pretty clearly extra T, right? And I can go through why I think that's the case, but like both of you are just sort of like remove means to get rid of something, right? And so the establishment of this agency doesn't seem to be that. You're making the argument that it's about the enforcement of the plan, but I guess I never really understand what you mean by that, right? Like that just doesn't seem to be true, right? Like you remove restrictions, but what about adding a new agency means enforcement of I don't know, maybe you can tie that more explicitly to the restrictions, but that I just don't follow that argument. So I think that you maybe have the tools to win that extra T is okay, but you got to like sit on it. It's got to be like half to 2 minutes of your speech, extending all of your arguments and answering all of the negative arguments about extra T. You can make arguments in your 1AR about how this falls under the immigration reform part of the resolution and all of this other stuff. But it's just like, and some of the things you say, like, well, we couldn't specify in cross-ex because that would be extra T. Well, why would that be extra T, but just not including the agency not be? So, it just in your like gut check, and I'm like, gut check to me, this obviously seems extra T. So I think that, extra T good is potentially winnable in this debate. And I think that on the neg, you kind of need to realize that like extra T is the way out. And just sit on this significantly harder than you do. I mean, you make a lot of extra T bad arguments, but this stuff, like you kind of make it in a few different places, and some of that is just because these flows got kind of messy. But I think you just need to be like, the way that the AF wins this debate is extra T good. So just like focusing a lot more time on the extra T debate. And then, the second thing is this other T argument I think is not extended super well. But I think that you need a little bit more, maybe, again, because your card is like they would apply for these green cards, and the neg is like, well, that's effects T, and that's never really, I don't know. I mean, so it's like not a lot of work is being done on that on either side, but I just think like if you extend your effects good arguments or whatever, that helps you on there. So I think that the biggest trouble for you is, I think, just the neg is kind of ahead on the AF as extra T, and that's bad. But there's potentially some concern on this other flow. So, I think that you should just like, some of this starts in the 1AR, and I just think like a more dedicated block, like these arguments about, eliminating, like restriction means eliminate. It's like, those are all arguments that the neg agrees with, right? So you don't have to rehash that debate. You need to like start the debate on how are you in elimination, or why is extra T okay, or potentially why is this in like an enforcement mechanism, just like any other plan maybe has an enforcement mechanism, like maybe kind of like bulk that argument to make it just clear in the 1AR about what specifically you're saying. So I think it's kind of like a cool AF. It's definitely different than what a lot of teams are saying, and potentially you could read it without the new agency, like if you're going to have these extra T problems, and just be like, they would do a new agency or something. I don't know. But as it stands now, definitely this is probably something negs will want to go for. So like having some really tight blocks on the AF, I think will be helpful for you. So, but like I said, I thought it was a good debate. Does either team have any questions about anything?
Yeah, first, just thank you. That was really good feedback. Second, because that was like my first thought, since you're like, okay, this is definitely extra T, but that maybe I could run this plan without that third plank saying to establish a new agency. Do you think that would actually grant me access to my advantages still, though? Because what happens? Who does it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it gives the negative new arguments, but sometimes you just have to choose. Do I want to have a T debate, or do I want to have a solvency debate? And when you're AF, I think generally you just got to pick, right? And if I were AF, I think I would pick to have the solvency debate, because you're going to be more comfortable with the AF, and most people aren't going to have a ton of cards about your AF. So I would pick the solvency debate. But, some people really like T debates, and then, you pick the T debate. So, yeah, it does create problems. For sure it creates problems, but I think you could go either way.
Okay, sweet. I appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
Do you have a question though? Generally, I try not to barrage the T's, but like they both seem to fit. Do you think that was an okay strat to do 2, or was it just excessive? 2 borderline 3, depending on how you count the extra.
Well, I mean, I think extra is essential, right? Like you're not
Yes.
like the AF 100% removes restrictions, I think,
Yes.
right? And certainly the way this debate's argued. So you're only going to win this T as an extra T argument. So
Yes.
I consider it one argument. To go for both in your last speech, it's not ideal, you know? I mean,
agree.
I don't know. I mean, like, it's fine. But I think in a perfect world, you go for 1 and you're just like,
Completely silent.
I'm a big fan of overviews on T. So just like, here is my interpretation of what the topic should look like. You remove restrictions. Here are AFs that remove restrictions, like this AF and this AF. And there's so many AFs that you could read. What happens in a world where you could add stuff? Well, you could do tons of things, right? Like you could just add whatever you want. That's a lot of stuff. It messes with our disads. Like, and then after you've kind of like laid like a broad overview like you would for a disad, then you're like, okay, let's do the line by line here. And so, you know, I think that your time is better spent doing that work on one of the T arguments rather than kind of like going for both of them.
Okay. Makes sense. That's about what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Thank you, Josh.
Cool. Yeah.
Alrighty, that's all I
All right.
got. So
Yeah.
appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yeah. Good debate.